So now let's go over to one of your other division rivals. Obviously, we're talking about all of them, but another one here in the New York Giants. Last year, they did make the playoffs and they actually won in the wild card game. Remember, they beat Minnesota. That was the vindication that Minnesota were the frauds we all thought they were. But nonetheless, Giants went 9-7-1, lost in the divisional round to Philly. If I remember correctly, not a close game. Nonetheless, their departures were center John Feliciano, guard Nick Gates, wide receivers Richie James and Kenny Golladay. Golladay being the big one because he was a big free agent signing for them a couple of years ago. Did not pan out at all. Cornerback Fabian Moreau, defensive back Julian Love, and safety Tony Jefferson. But they did add some pieces in wide receiver Jamison Crowder. Took a chance on wide receiver Paris Campbell from the Colts, and then brought in wide receiver Cole Beasley, which familiarity with the scheme there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they brought in defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson and Rakeem Nunez-Roches, and linebacker Bobby Okereke, and cornerback Bobby McCain. And in the draft, they went and got cornerback Deontay Banks out of Maryland in the first round at pick 24. And then from what I saw, he's like the consensus top center ish, always at least one or two. But they got center John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota in the second round. And then a wide receiver that I liked in Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee in the third round at pick 73. As we all know, a burner, but has some things to polish, but he may find a role as a speed threat. Nonetheless, John, what are your thoughts on the Giants and if they can take another step forward with Daniel Jones? And why am I blanking on the coach's name? Brian Daboll.
The Giants are such a weird team, right? Because last year I had rather low expectations, and I think they definitely exceeded those, making the playoffs. Also, it feels hard to judge their playoff run because, once again, the Vikings were just such a fraudulent team, man. Like, not to say that the Vikings weren't like worthy of making the playoffs. They were not. What did they have? 14 wins.
I think they were the 2 wins. I got the standings.
Yeah, and there was a scenario out there that I remember us talking about where the Vikings in the last 2 weeks of the season almost could have taken the 1 seed because I remember Jalen Hurts got hurt and he wasn't playing, and the Eagles dropped that game to, I think it was the Saints, and so there was a possibility that the Vikings would take the first seed. Yes, I don't know. It was a very weird situation. They didn't end up doing it.
They were 3, but they were 13 and we'll talk about Vikings later, but they were 13-4, tied with San Fran and 1 game behind Philadelphia. So you're definitely right in what you're saying.
So my point being, it just feels hard to judge the Giants season because, they won a playoff game, but it was against the Minnesota Vikings, who, when they played a lot of these other playoff teams, they were getting absolutely schmacked outside of the Bills game. But you think back to at least I remember when they played the Cowboys, we beat them 40-3 or something. It was a complete blowout in Minnesota. So whenever they were just playing good teams, and we talked about the whole point differential thing, they were skating on thin ice. My point is, I don't know how to judge the Giants going into this year. I like the moves that they've made over the last 2 years. I've honestly, it kind of upsets me that I like what their GM has done, to be honest. You got Evan Neal, who I was very high on coming out of the draft last year. You pair him with Andrew Thomas, so now your tackles are pretty set. You add in John Michael Schmitz, who, like you said, is a very highly rated center. And also, the center in the second and third round is just such a great value pick because you can get guys who are going to be all pro centers in those rounds, which what other round can you, what other position group can you say you're going to get a potential all pro in the third round? And you feel confident that could happen. With the center, it feels like that happens every 2 or 3 years. You're getting a Pro Bowl caliber guy. Not saying that John Michael Schmitz is going to be that, but there's a possibility. So I like in general what they've done with the offensive line. You do that to really beef up for the run game for Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida, Eric Gray. Some of these guys that they've added into the running back room. And Yeah, so the offense, I generally like it because I do think that they're going to maintain that same identity of run heavy. My biggest question mark is still the same question mark that I've had for quite a long time with the Giants, which the offensive line was the biggest one for a long time, but is the wide receiver room. Like the current depth chart, which I don't know how accurate this is, but the depth chart lists Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and Paris Campbell as their starting receivers, with Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Sterling Shepard, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder. Like they got a lot. Excuse me. They have a lot of veteran options or very young, highly drafted, promising options on that receiver room. But it just doesn't feel like any of these guys are like a true number one or even, to be honest, a true number two receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson has potential. We'll see about Jalen Hyatt. He potentially has potential. But there's just a lot of question marks for those weapons. You do add Darren Waller, which I think is nice, but can he be that true number one target like he was with the Raiders? I don't know. I mean, he's getting up there in age. You know, with this kind of system, they're going to run heavy a lot, then they throw to the tight end, but maybe the defense could potentially key in on Darren Waller a lot and try to make like a guy like Darius Slayton beat you. I'm still not a big Daniel Jones fan personally. I do think that he's slowly improving, but I don't really view him as a franchise quarterback. And that was like the one move that I didn't like the Giants made, is that they committed the big contract to him. So I don't know. I don't know how to feel about the offense. I don't know if they're going to get worse, because I do like in general the moves they made. Like on paper, you beef up the offensive line even more, and your young guys like Thomas and Evan Neal will get better. You add Darren Waller, that's good. Saquon should be healthy. You have continuity with the quarterback and the coach now. So these are like good moves on paper. You add Jalen Hyatt in the draft, who he's a speedster, and we'll see how he turns out. Like these are good moves on paper. It's just, will that actually change the dynamic much? I'm not sure. For the defense, I like the general defensive unit they got over there. You know, Kayvon Thibodeau, he had a really solid rookie season. Then you still have Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, who are two studs. I was very high on Azeez Ojulari. He's getting a year where he's going to be like the full-fledged starter at one of the linebacker spots. So I don't know. I generally like what they got on defense. There's also some, like the corner. We'll see how Deonte Banks works out, because he's going to come in right away and be a starter. I'm also not super sure on the safety spot across from Xavier McKinney. I don't know. It says Jason Pinnock is the current starter, but they have Bobby McCain, who's a veteran, on the bench. I don't know. Point being, I just don't know how to feel about this team. They have some good spots, but then they have other spots like linebacker, receiver, that just feel so incredibly weak that it could hold them back.
Yeah, my apologies. Forgot to mention Darren Waller. I forget it was via trade. Fortunately, the site I use only did free agents, so I had to remember the trades. But I'm along the same lines with you, actually, and I'm concerned with the pass catchers, even Darren Waller, because let's be honest, mentioned in our tight end rankings, like a clean bill of health has been an issue for him staying healthy. We all know he's a dynamic weapon. He could be a great one, short, intermediate, or even the deep threat if Daniel Jones unlocks more of that in his game, which is also a concern of mine. Is if they can do that, and if they can even have that be a part of their offense, either because Daniel Jones won't really push the ball downfield, or they don't even have the wide receivers to get separation. Be interesting to see how they utilize Hyatt and Campbell, and like Hyatt and Campbell are kind of similar guys, where speedsters, raw athletes, kind of. Obviously, Campbell been dealing with injuries since he got into the league, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Isaiah Hodgins too, like as good as he had of a season last year, can he build on that? Going into this year, we'll have to see. And then obviously they figured out the whole Saquon ordeal, so that was going to be a concern. But nonetheless, once again, I feel like now that teams have had an off season, may look at the Giants and kind of have the same mindset of, okay, let's just make Daniel Jones beat us and take away the read option, all those type of and the quick throws and the quick decisions that kind of helped Daniel Jones last year. Make Daniel Jones kind of pat the ball more, sit there and make big time plays. And we know he didn't really have to do much of that last year. There's a lot of managing games, and I say that with it's a compliment. It's not easy to manage any sort of game, and he did a very good job of that. As obviously they made the playoffs, won a game. and had a few games where they came back because he didn't make too many mistakes. They were only a possession or two behind, and with Saquon himself as a playmaker with his legs, and maybe one of these receivers pop up, they could very well be back in the playoff picture. But yeah, I kind of have them in that. They went 9-7-1 last year. I have them like in that range, like 9-8, maybe like 10-7. If maybe who knows. But I would be shocked too if they were one of these teams that outside looking in, kind of a down year.
Are the schedules released yet?
Yeah, they should be.
I'm wondering who do we play in the AFC? Ooh, we play the AFC East. Ooh. Jets, Bills, Dolphins. Yeah,
that's gonna be tough. Yeah, so
Patriots. I only bring that up just because, like I agree with you. I think they feel like they could be in this like 7 to 10 win range. Like maybe they take a little bit of a step back, maybe they take a little bit of a step forward, maybe they're the exact same. I don't know. But the schedule they have is actually kind of tough.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
I guess we'll see when we finally do our season predictions. Because usually I look like the first month, because I feel like the first month can kind of dictate. Obviously, also be like on paper, but we'll have to see. I know obviously they start off with you guys week 1, right? I believe.
Yeah, I mean, well, like you said, we'll do our predictions later, but I'll read off. They start with us, then they go to the Cardinals, which they should win, because the Cardinals are just in shambles right now, and who knows if Kyler Murray's back by that point. Yeah. But then they go to like the Niners, and they play Seattle, who they lost to last year. I think Seattle beat them by like 2 scores or something. Then they go to the Dolphins, which are obviously a pretty formidable team. Then the Bills. Like, that's a tough start to the season. Then the Commanders, and then the Jets. Like, who knows how the Jets are going to look this year. About midway through the season, they could have hit their stride. It's kind of a tough start to the season. I think after that, like, first 6 games, we'll truly know who the Giants are. Because if they come out of there, even, like, what was it? First 6 games, Cowboys, Cardinals, 49ers, Seahawks, Dolphins, Bills. If they come out of the first 6 with 3 wins, I would be impressed. Genuinely.
Yeah. That would be, I think, a dub. Like a win for Giants fans, I think. That means your team's at least winning some of these kind of 50-50 or games where they're the underdog, at least maybe 1 or 2 of them. But we'll see if they can do that. It's just hard, so hard to win those close games. We see it so many times. There's always one of the teams that, they were 3-12 in 1 possession games this year, but then all of a sudden they flip the script next year, or vice versa, where they were really good in 1 possession games. Kind of like the Vikings were really good in 1 possession games last year. And obviously we saw them kind of come to earth later, but very well can be the same for the Giants, who had a lot of close games and games that kind of went down to the wire. And it's just hard to maintain success that way. You got to kind of be on the offensive in today's NFL. Your offense has to be able just to strike at any moment. Doesn't really feel like that with the Giants, especially in the pass game, but we'll see.
I will just say, in terms of, 1-score games, which some of these were 8 points too. So, but in the general, sorry, what?
No, yeah, quote unquote 1 score. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, 1 score. Some of these are 8 point wins as well. But they were 9-3. They were 9-4 in 1-score games. How many games did they win last year?
They won 9, right? So that's all their wins were like close wins.
I'm trying to see. Did I miscount any of these? Their biggest win was, like the biggest margin they won by was against the Commanders when they won by 8 points. It was 20-12.
So, and even then, it wasn't like...
Oh, wait, no, sorry, 8. They only had 8 because they beat the Colts, but that was like the second to last game of the year where the Colts were like tanking.
Yeah, the Colts were terrible.
So, yeah, they won 8 of their 9 games were 1-score wins.
And the only other, that one was against the Colts. So, important asterisk there. So, let's see if they can take that next step into being a playoff contender, and see if Daniel Jones, now with that contract, maybe he can take the next step for the Giants as well.
Also, just had to throw it in there. The playoff game was also a 1-score game. They won by 7.
So even then, like, important caveat, but...